this time around I don't have any presentation because I want to make this as practical as possible. Recently, I've been trying to move into a kind of coaching that is called human connection transformation coaching, where basically it's trying to gravitate or move away from training or coaching that, you know, is normally seen as some kind of authoritarian, where the presenter is in front with their presentation and everybody looks at them as an authority. No, I'm not an authority. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what we call co-creation. All of us here, we're going to share, all right, information. I have a background in teaching. Teachers have got one skill that they always use when they are teaching a new concept. They start from known to unknown. So every human being has got something that they know, right? So I'm going to take that kind of approach, right? Where each one of us here is going to contribute something. I might be chipping in something that we need to discuss as a plenary, but it will be all of us here brainstorming how best we can deal with that particular topic. Is that okay? All right, so like she said, we'll talk more about our role as journalists, you know, in trying to advance Africa's position on reparative justice. Now, when you look at that role alone, I think it should make us shudder with fear, with anxiety, because it's a huge role, right? It's like everybody else is looking upon us as journalists to help Africa champion its position. What it means basically is that, to me, I look at this as not mere reporting, right? But trying to, you know, amplify voices, trying to shape narratives, as well as try to, you know, drive accountability. Some of the issues that have already been talked about earlier on by previous speakers. So before we dive in, and then as we try to connect our purpose as journalists, I want each one of you to think of a story that you've done recently or you've encountered recently that kind of, you know, highlights the importance of fair and accurate representation of issues, right? This story doesn't have to be about reparative justice, right? It could be some story that resonated with your commitment to truth and impact. So let's think about some story. It could be a story that you recently wrote or reported on, or you just encountered, but it resonated with your commitment to truth and impact. So think of some story that either you did personally or some other reporter did the story and it resonated with your commitment to truth and impact. So I'll give you maybe 30 seconds, each one of us. Let's think of some story. Either we did that story or somebody else did that story, but that story resonated with your, you know, your commitment to impact and truth. 30 seconds, think of some story. And when you've thought of some story, you just put up your hand, a mic will come to your place. We've read some story, we've heard some story, we've watched some story on TV. So which story resonated with your commitment to truth and impact?
Alors, je suis Adama Bakayoko, je suis journaliste ivoirien. J'espère que je ne me suis pas trompé parce que je n'ai pas pris le casque, mais ce que j'ai compris, c'est que je devais relater donc une histoire, un reportage, en tant que journaliste que j'ai dû mener et qui a eu un impact véritable après la diffusion de ce reportage. En 2021, la Covid venait de frapper bien sûr le monde entier. Et j'ai mené une enquête à la frontière nord de la Côte d'Ivoire, dans une ville qu'on appelle Ouangolodougou. C'est la frontière ivoiro-burkinabé, précisément de l'Alé-Rabat. Et là-bas, les frontières étaient officiellement fermées. Mais les forces de l'ordre prenaient de l'argent avec les passagers pour leur permettre de traverser la frontière. J'ai pris des risques parce que je suis allé dans un véhicule banalisé avec aussi de l'argent pour les tester et j'ai dû traverser la frontière dans le sens Côte d'Ivoire-Burkina autour de 16 heures Je suis venu à minuit et figurez-vous, de Wangolo à Nyangoloko, à aucun moment on m'a demandé mes papiers. Tout simplement parce que le chauffeur qui était avec moi payait de l'argent aux forces de l'ordre. Et quand j'ai diffusé le reportage sur la radio nationale, la radio Côte d'Ivoire, j'ai eu donc des menaces du commissaire de Wangolo-Dougou qui a dû donc me menacer pour me dire pourquoi j'ai fait cela, tout ça. Mais par contre, j'ai eu les félicitations du préfet de la localité. Et 2 mois plus tard, le ministre de la Défense et le ministre de l'Intérieur sont allés à Wangolo et ils ont dû relever de leur poste tous les responsables militaires et de la police qui y étaient. Donc je peux conclure que ce reportage a eu un impact réel sur la sécurité parce que quand chacun peut traverser comme il veut, on peut avoir des terroristes qui font les frontières dans les deux sens sans être inquiétés. Il suffit d'avoir juste de l'argent pour payer aux forces de l'ordre. Voilà un peu mon histoire. J'espère que je ne suis pas hors sujet.
I took the cameraman. We went through all the streets of Yaoundé. He was filming all the potholes. And when I came back, my report was describing all the potholes. I used very literal language to really discuss. I made the common man on the streets. I didn't even think about the editorial policy of that. So I said it the way it was. So I didn't proofread my story. I knew what I was doing because if I gave my story for proofreading, I knew they were going to slash some paragraphs or even said my report should not be broadcast. So now my report was broadcast, and guess what? The following day, the Minister of Housing and Urban Development called for a press briefing and announced that they're going to fill the potholes in 2 weeks. But then I had issues with my editor-in-chief. They were like, do you know you can be suspended for this? I said, I gave the facts the way it was. But I was happy with the work I did because the minister watched the report and he had a press briefing. And after they filled the potholes, though the roads are still not that good, but the potholes were filled. And I'm happy with what I did.
Wow, thanks so much.
Oui, merci. Comme Winston vient de le dire, moi, c'est Joséphine de la République démocratique du Congo. Je voulais dire tout ce que ma consoeur du Cameroun a déjà évoqué, Rita. Je viens aussi dernièrement de faire un reportage sur la situation de route dans mon pays, dans la capitale. À Kinshasa, c'est presque toutes les routes sont quasi inexistantes. Il n'y a pas de route dans la capitale. Elles sont toutes détériorées et ça complique un peu la population. Et nous avons le centre-ville et ça se trouve un peu à l'extrémité de la ville. Et mon reportage était focalisé sur les communes voisines au centre-ville. Parce que le centre-ville, c'est à l'extrémité, il faut traverser, il y a des gens qui quittent l'autre côté de la capitale pour arriver au centre-ville. Et comme ça, tout le jour, parce que c'est là qu'il y a des bureaux, c'est là qu'il y a, je peux dire, toute l'administration, de toutes les institutions et tout. Mais comment ces gens font? Ils peuvent quitter chez eux, la route est bonne, mais lorsqu'on arrive à quelques kilomètres du centre-ville, on ne sait plus continuer. Et c'est là que j'avais fait un reportage sur l'accès au centre-ville. J'ai pris les images sur toutes les avenues détériorées de ce coin-là. Et c'est passé à la télévision. Bon, chez nous, c'est vrai qu'on a aussi la même ligne éditoriale. Nous travaillons pour l'État congolais. Mais parfois, lorsqu'on parle de questions qui concernent la population, on nous dérange, on ne nous inquiète pas trop. Mais après avoir diffusé mon reportage, c'est la présidence de la République qui a appelé notre directeur général pour lui poser la question. Et bon, elle m'a juste demandé, est-ce que ton directeur était d'accord pour cet élément? J'ai dit oui, il était d'accord, on en a discuté à la rédaction. Mais après, le bon côté maintenant de l'histoire, c'est que moins d'une semaine après, c'est le président de la République lui-même qui est allé faire l'évaluation de ces routes-là. Il est parti, il a fait la ronde de toutes les avenues que moi j'avais relevées dans mon reportage. Il a visité toutes ces routes et au moment où nous parlons, il y a seulement un mois, tout au plus 2 mois, au moment où nous parlons, toutes ces routes sont déjà en train d'être réhabilitées.
Oh, wow, a big end again. OK.
Et Winston, je disais tout à l'heure à Howard,
yeah, just a quick one, all right.
Je voulais ajouter juste un petit point. Alors, j'ai demandé, parce que dans ma présentation, il faut parler aussi de ces genres d'histoire. Alors, j'ai demandé comment on voit tout ce reportage. Là, on pourra suivre ça peut-être demain si ça arrive à temps. Donc, voilà, c'est ce que je voulais ajouter.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, so here's the thing. That was a kind of introduction. That was a kind of introduction just to show the impact that the media has in our local communities, right? Now, here's what we're going to do. At a scale of 1 to 5, get this clearly. At a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the coverage of reparative justice by African media? On a scale of 1 to 5, how well do you think the African media is covering issues to do with reparative justice? You should also give us a reason. Maybe 2 out of 5, also give us a reason. So out of 1, from 1 to 5, from scale 1 to 5, how well do you think the African media is covering issues to do with reparative justice? Okay, so those who say, well, the ones, let's put up our hands. No ones, okay? The 2s, say, okay, 2. Okay, 3, 4. Are you people saying we are doing well? Okay, fine. Okay, I'm still at 4. Please, don't be shy. If you are with me on 4, put up your hand. 5. Okay, yeah, there is a hand there. Okay, you are on 5. Okay, so there is only one person who said 5. And then meaning that the rest of us are 0? Okay, let's start with the 5, Sharon. So you said, you are like, you agree that African media is doing well in terms of reporting reparative justice. And can you tell us why you think so?
The reason why I said 5 is to a certain extent, there are publications, especially the ones that are not aligned to the government or state-owned. They are doing, they are the reasons why we put it to the scale of 5. But the majority, which is state-controlled, they're not really doing justice because they are indirectly controlled, or what they publish is actually influenced by who's owning and who's funding. Yeah.
Mauritius was just given back a group of islands from the British, where there's a American base there. So by giving us back that, we are getting reparative economic justice also, because we're going to get a lot of money. So there's been a lot of coverage on that, on the reparative justice, the financial sum that we're going to get, the damages that has been done to the community that was displaced there and all that. So over the span of 9 years, there was a lot done, society, civil society, journalists, government, to advocate for that. So yeah, in my country it's been like that, but on African level, so I haven't seen any. Personally, I haven't seen anything.
Okay, do you have another one? Who has some other views? Yes. So the question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how well do you think the African media is covering issues to do with reparative justice? Yes.
Only when we, for example, there is a meeting of the African Union about this topic, that's the moment you hear talking about reparative justices, and so there are very, very few journalists who talk about this. So I think I would give 2. You just in my country, I'm not talking about Africa as well, because
the whole continent.
Yeah, I'm doubtful, but yeah.
So thanks so much. So this is how we will proceed. We'll look at the media as educators. We'll look at media as citizen leader bridge. We are going to look at how we in this room and many others out there, fellow journalists out there, are going to challenge the current dominant narrative. Because if you look at it, most of the stories around reparative justice are not written by us, right? They are mostly written by other people, and most of the times they are not favorable to us, right? So we're going to see how we're going to challenge that kind of narrative. And then towards the end, we're going to look at what I call tools. They could also be called tips of how we can write effective stories around reparative justice. And then towards the end, collectively, we're going to discuss what are the challenges? Why are we not writing stories around reparative justice? All right? And then maybe what could be the solutions, right? So that's the kind of journey that we're going to take. All right. So just to give a bit of a background, around this was on 12 February, you remember, Howard, there was an online press briefing, right? Organized by Aphrodite, right? Now, basically, they were discussing the topic of reforming the global financial system. So during that, the reason why I'm bringing that press briefing is because the issues that were raised are related. They kind of, it coincided, actually, that press briefing coincided with my research around the topics that I'll bring here. So during that press briefing, I asked a question. I said, okay, you are experts in these things. So how best, the question basically was something like, how best do you think journalists can report reparative justice in Africa? So they gave different answers, right? So some of the answers that they gave, I've extracted some quotations, some information that we're going to use. So I wanted to give that kind of background, right? So we are going to start with the first part. The first part basically will focus on how we, as the media, can play the role of educating and sensitizing the masses out there around reparative justice. So during that press briefing that I talked about, which was conducted online, Adrian Tanyaradzwa Chikore, who is the senior Pan-Africa advisor at Christian Aid, said, among so many things that he said during that time, he said, the media is the gateway to ensuring Africans understand the issues doubling the continent. We need factual information to reclaim Africa's narratives. I mean, I agree with those sentiments. That Africa, the journalist or the media is the gateway to ensuring that Africans understand the issues around debt, and also that, we need to be providing factual information to reclaim Africa's narrative. I agree with those sentiments. Yes, sir. And maybe you tell us why you agree with those sentiments.
Majority of African governments are corrupt. Not all, but majority of them. Like we've been discussing with the DEBs and the NDAs, the clause and everything. So they do their best to make sure that this information does not reach the masses. The institutions that can connect and make sure that that information reaches the masses is the journalists. And if you guys remember, there was just last year, the Kenyans rose up against some things that the government was doing. And it was mainly through media that covered that and social media. So I do agree. Journalists are the gateway or the connectors to make sure that the public, the masses, know what's going on, either good or bad.
Thanks so much. Somebody else? Yes, sir.
Media is the mouthpiece of the people. And that is to say that whatever concerns the people have, the media exists to channel those information to the various governments. Now, in the same way, if the African continent also wants good stories to be told about them, the responsibility also lies on the African media to then tell these stories about Africa for the rest of the world to hear. But of course, the earlier question you asked has to do with how well we've been telling the stories about Africa to the rest of the world. Almost all the time, if you look at or if you do a deep dive on stories that are being written about Africa, sometimes we get peeved. We get peeved that the negative stories are being written about us. But of course, it is the people out there who are writing the stories about us. And we as African media are not doing our best to write the stories about us. So I agree, we are the mouthpiece, but we are not doing our work.
Exactly. So here's the thing. I intended this to be some kind of group work, but I think we're going to do just as a plenary. There is a statement here. One thing that people out there face is to access information, right? Especially the masses. They face problems in terms of how they can access information, especially around issues to do with reparative justice, right? Now, my question is, how can we, as the media, overcome the accessibility challenges that the people out there face in terms of how they can access information? We people here around in this room, we are privileged to have access to this information, right? But out there, believe you me, they don't have access to this information. So how best can we deal with this problem? i.e., how can we deal with the problem of people out there accessing information around reparative justice?
For me and for my colleagues, I think the issue of reparative justice has not come in a full package for us to be full information and to be digested first on our own and then disseminated to the public. What does that mean? How much is stolen from, is valued? Is it valued? And who's going to take that money? Are African countries properly going to use if that money is dispersed by the Western? Or are they going to stash it in the Swiss bank or somewhere? The issue should first be, I think, in my opinion, to be understood by the journalists themselves, and then we take it to the people.
All right.
As I said, it's too early to talk about bringing another asset just to spoil. We have not yet used as an Africa our own resources properly, and we didn't manage.
Yes.
So even if that money comes, I don't believe that we are going to change.
The onus is on us, all of us here, right? To find ways and means, depending on the media house, how do people out there access this vital information? It must not just end with us, right? We always write for our audiences out there. Yeah, very quickly, just chip in.
Yeah, so if you look at the conversation on the reparative justice, was begun by the OAU as far back as in the 1960s. And now it is still the agenda that the AU is carrying forward. But then again, they are in segment. They talk about various things, including climate reparation, things that has to do with supporting the Green Fund, Climate Fund, talking about the Loss and Damage Fund and all that. So they are in various forms. But then the AU, which is leading this agenda, stresses the point that to make the implementation of this agenda a success, there has to be clear strategies, institutional coordination, and robust partnerships, and civil society organizations, regional economic communities, government, and diaspora groups. The AU that is leading the agenda fails to mention media, which is a critical institution on the continent of Africa that has to partner this conversation. I don't know whether the AU consider the media as a CSO, because the AU itself fails to recognize that the media has a role to play. So for us, where do we come in? You understand? We are not talking about reparative justice in the first place because the AU fails to recognize us as a media. But very importantly, whether they recognize us or they do not, it is our work to
play our role,
yes,
right?
We need to play our role. And just like my colleague here said, we first need to understand the conversation and how the whole issue of reparative justice will be carried out. Of course, they talk about returning restitution of the artifact, which is something that has recently happened in Ghana. A U.S. museum returned some artifact to the Asantehene, which they took away during the Sagranti War. And we all gave thumbs up to it. We did a lot of stories about it. A lot of media platforms carried the story. But that ends there. In terms of the other components of the reparative justice that the AU is pushing, nobody hears about it.
All right, thanks so much. I think we all agree that as journalists, one of the fundamental tasks that we have is to simplify concepts and issues, right? So I want us to do quickly that kind of role play. So who wants to be a journalist? A journalist who is going to play what reparative justice means to different audiences. There will be a farmer and a trader. Obviously, you can't push the same meaning to these two. Do you want to be a journalist? You want to be the journalist? Okay, we have a journalist. Okay, so come in front, and then randomly I'll choose somebody who is going to be a trader, somebody who is going to be a farmer. Come in front, sir. Okay, maybe you can be there. Wants to be a farmer? Okay, I'll choose you to be a farmer. Yes, please. Sir, can you be a trader? Right? Fine. So the assignment is very simple. He's a trader. she's a farmer. These two who understand the concept of reparative justice differently. Now, can you explain what reparative justice means to this trader?
So, yes, Mr. Trader. So what we are talking about here, when we mention reparative justice, for a very long period of time, the global north in dealing with Africa has, not leveled the playing field such that you, the trader, you can get the money that you are supposed to get. For instance, if you are dealing with the global north, that is to say the Europeans and the Americans, you realize that we have to buy everything that we buy from them using their own currency. And that means that using about 10-fold of your currency to buy a single currency from them. In that level, or in that sense, there's no equity. So reparative justice here in applying to you is to say that what can we do, or what can be done such that we can level the playing field? You and I, when we are trading, we can be equal. And that is what the African Union is pushing for in terms of the perspective of the trader, equity.
All right, thanks. So I'll let the audience judge, just hold on. So can you explain what reparative justice means to the farmer? Very briefly.
Yes, Madam Farmer. So when it comes to reparative justice, the global north has long been industrialized. When it comes to industrialization, Africa is not a continent that is well industrialized. And we are saying that the industrialization activities of the global north has led to, the emission of greenhouse gases. And now the atmosphere is heavily polluted. And that is what has brought about climate change. And you as a farmer, your farming activity cannot go on because it is not raining. The land is dry. And so even when you spend money to buy fertilizer to fertilize your land, you are still not getting the money that you pumped into your farming activity back. So the AU is saying that how do we ensure that our farmers, at the end of the day, there will be some form of compensation because we, the global north, are the ones who caused your land to be dry, are the ones who has caused you not to be able to get money from the fertilizer investments that you have made. How do we compensate you so that the farmers' activities can be supported?
The long and short of it is that, please, as journalists, let's craft our stories depending on the audience. Sometimes we make the mistake of writing a story, publishing it to various types of audiences, yet we pretty know that they will probably understand the issues different, right? The understanding levels are different. So let's take that into account. When you're writing a story, ask yourself, what is my audience? Okay, then craft your story, your article, depending on that particular audience. Just like he has done, he has tried to craft the definition of reparative justice because he was directing that to a trader, similarly to a farmer, right? And then moving on, we talked about trying to challenge the dominant narrative. Here's what we're going to do. There's a headline here. There are two headlines. One of them seems to be, okay, I'll talk about that later on. Can you take a piece of paper or you write on your computer? There are two headlines here that we are going to discuss as examples of how we can deal with the dominant narrative. So the first headline says, Global North approves reparations package. Again, Global North approves reparations package. That's the first headline. The second one says, African leaders demand transparent reparations process. African leaders demand transparent reparations process. Right? Should I repeat the headlines again? Okay, the first one, Global North approves reparations package. Global North approves reparations package. The second one, African leaders demand transparent reparations process. Now, which of these two headlines, in your opinion, empowers African agency?
I think for me, the first one.
Okay.
Because we are talking about something that's legally been done. Yeah. It's already approved. they demand. They are presidents. I am an activist. I'm the one who demands. They need to go there and ensure that Africa is a unified position and it's also ratified. I mean, demand, I mean, honestly, what is demand?
All right. Somebody else, you wanted to say something, yeah. Which one? The first one or second one?
I think the second one puts like the continent, Africa, as the main actor. So it's like an African initiative. It's we demanding, not depending on what comes from abroad.
Sometimes stories are framed to the disadvantage of us as Africans, right? That's the whole purpose. So these two headlines kind of tries to summarize that, to say as journalists, especially as African journalists, we should be very careful. We should take the lead. So these headlines kind of talks or gives an example of how sometimes stories can be framed to the disadvantage of Africans, right? Now, let me give you a quick answer, my opinion in these two headlines. To me, the second headline gives the African agency, right? Because there are a number of reasons. One, if you look at it, it's put in an active voice, right? Which we always encourage in headline writing. And again, the most important one, because of time, the most important one is that, you know, if you look at the headline, the Global North approves reparations package, it presents the Global North as the masters, right? As the main actor, right? Yet the second one is giving an impression that we as Africans should take a leading role in demanding, right? Not waiting for the Global North to say, it's like, if you look at the second one, it's like they are doing us a favor, right? They're doing us a favor, right? Yet that's not true. The truth of the matter is that it is our African leaders who have got to take the initiative, who have to demand these reparations, right? Can see the time master is, mistress rather, pushing for time. So I'll just rush to the last points. Sorry, I'll try to share this at some point. So lastly, let me share with you the 12 tips that we can use to write effective stories. I know you know some of these tips, right? So the first one is this. Before you write your story, can you make sure that you know your audience? That's most important. There are 2 reasons why you should know your audience. One, this is going to help you, for example, to what level do they understand this issue that I want to write about? And mind you, like I said in the introduction, nobody is totally empty, right? At least they've got some kind of knowledge. So you should start from that level of their understanding, and then you move on to new information, right? And then secondly, why we need to know and understand our audience. The reason why we need to understand our audience is that each audience will receive or consume news differently, right? Others receive news better in audio format, others in video format, others in word format, right? So just try to understand your audience and then package your information in the right format, right? Number 2, team up. By team up, what I mean is journalists are not experts. What we always strive for is working knowledge, right? So when you're writing stories around reparative justice, the good thing is that Aphrodite has got a pool of experts, right? Can you make sure that whenever you are writing a story, depending on the angle that you have taken, try to contact other experts. It could be a fellow journalist, it could be somebody else, to make sure that your story at least is concrete, is understandable, is comprehensive. Never ever work on a story, especially around reparative justice. We've seen here how complicated these things are, right? Number 3, sorry, madam. Number 3, drop the jargon, right? There was a time when I was a victim of this issue. I would take a press statement full of jargons, and then write a story based on those jargons, and then push it to the masses. Then one day, my editor said, Winston, do you even understand what you have written? My lame excuse then was, well, this is how the owners of this press statement have written, which was very bad, right? So let's make sure that all those technical terms, difficult words, put them in simpler language, right? Number 4, quote varied voices. As journalists, we've got this tendency, bad tendency. when a story comes, we rush to officials only, right? We neglect the masses, the people out there, the farmers, the traders. Can you make sure that your story has got varied voices? Sometimes we even forget children, right? School children, students, right? And then finally, the issue of humanizing. I think if we talk about reparative justice, we talk about billions, without painting or bringing in a human being into the story, that story will never, ever make an impact. Try to connect it, for example, why some women continue to travel long distances, why women continue to draw water from some unprotected sources, right? And then that way, it has been proven that when you write a story that links the problem to a human being, that story has got, it brings up that kind of emotion, right? Whether it's an emotion of sadness, an emotion of happiness, and what have you, all right? Well, on that note, thanks so much.